Welcome, everybody, to the 26th stream of DBB Live. Hope you've all had a great day so far and are ready to talk some Detroit basketball. I'm Wes Davenport from Motor City Hoops and Detroit Bad Boys, and I am, as always, joined by the Aussie himself, Jack Kelly from Detroit Bad Boys. Jack, how you feeling tonight before preseason game 2?
I'm hyped, man. I'm hyped, Wes. How good is it to have Pistons basketball back? We've got a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on. Pistons Twitter's already nearly imploding. But I love it. It's good to have things to talk about. And yeah, I'm excited for today's show.
Yeah, if this has been any preview for what the season's going to look like, we are in for a treat, at least online, because it took all of one preseason game for Pistons Twitter to explode. So laughing down here in the bottom of our screen, our guy, Sean Courtman, editor at Detroit Bad Boys. Sean, how are you feeling about that first preseason game, huh?
I liked the game, even though they got pretty throttled. And then the discourse, it was a heavy dose. So we'll see what we're in store for after game 2.
Fair enough. Jack, I know you said you had some just like starting points for us. So you want to take it away? Or is he frozen? Is he frozen for you as well, Sean? I just need to confirm.
I am not seeing him move.
Me either. All right. Well, let's just get rolling then. Sean, wanted to get your, I guess, just temperature on how that first game went. You know, how the starters looked, specifically Cade. Obviously, it's just kind of an introduction to the team. So what were your main takeaways?
Cade looked rusty. I think I can safely acknowledge that, but you saw still the skills that he had that will be on display, which should help so many other people. It was hard not to be impressed by a Stewart Thompson. It was hard not to be impressed by Jaden Ivey off the bench. The big takeaways I had in that game were it was schematically interesting to see how dedicated the Pistons were to using their bigs to kind of dive into the lane and either pass or cut and score. I mean, we saw that last year with the Pistons, but it seemed to really be a point of emphasis to get the ball inside, not as post-up opportunities, but as trying to create opportunities close to the basket for the big facing the basket to score or dish. That was really nice to see. I really liked Stewart Thompson's defense. I know I raved about him last time we were talking, but it's just so obvious the way that he can contribute to winning basketball games. And the less I need to see him shoot and prove he can't shoot, the better. Or, you know, I'll take any scoring opportunity I can get just to get that defense on the floor. And then from the Suns' perspective, my big takeaway of the Suns is I can't believe this team is relying on Jusuf Nurkic. He was so bad. And they have NBA title aspirations, and it was just shocking to me. I can't believe a team would hate DeAndre Ayton that much.
No, agreed. And Nurkic is like, he's the definition of an offense-only big, right? But, you know, those three main guys for the Suns, I remember the first half, they were just hitting some shots where I was putting my head down, shaking my head, going, you know, what could you do about that? What did they shoot in the first quarter? Like 85%, something like that. How did you rate and kind of analyze the defense that the Pistons were playing live when you've got Devin Booker kind of plowing through three different guys, closing his eyes and tossing it over his head, and it goes in?
I mean, the Pistons were overmatched. I don't think we can say anything other than they were bested by superior players, superior team. They didn't really break down defensively more than just they were out-muscled, out-skilled. So I think it was not quite a good litmus test for what the team could be. Not that I'm expecting a great defense overall, but I'm not ready to see what the Monty influence is or internal improvements. Let's see what they do against the Thunder to try and wait on making a judgment there.
Yeah, no. Speaking of some of those adjustments that Monty was making, I mean, it's the show title here. Obviously, Jaden Ivey ended up coming off the bench there for game 1. Obviously, it's just one preseason game, so we have to be careful not to make too many sweeping predictions or big takeaways out of that. It was just the starting 5 for the first preseason game. Could mean anything. But what were your thoughts on that? I know obviously you really liked Desar Thompson's defense. He seemed to fit pretty nicely there in the backcourt next to Cade in that aspect. I thought he did well against Devin Booker, at least as well as a rookie could do. So, as far as that lineup goes, what were your thoughts on that decision?
I mean, I'm glad to see Asur in the starting lineup any which way they can do it. I don't know if it should have come at the expense of Ivy compared to some other options, but like you said, seeing them as a pair, it was hard not to recognize how complementary they were skill set wise, as far as Cade's sort of all around game and guile with Thompson's elite's athleticism and defensive ability to kind of take that pressure off Cade. I don't think that necessarily requires him to be a shooting guard. He could do it from any part of the wing position in either forward spot. So really to me, it was just a byproduct of they want Thompson on the floor. They want him to start. Where do they think he'll be most comfortable to start the season? And then we'll see how things evolve from there.
Yeah, and this from Chuck Brewer here was something I wanted to bring up as well because, obviously Ivy goes to the bench, Thompson steps up, and to your point, I mean Thompson for the most part, I thought he really played well, but Alec Burks was kind of invisible out there. I mean, if there's the trade off that you're making to put Asar Thompson in at the expense of someone else, who maybe would you have done instead of Alec Burks? I guess is what I'm getting at because I'm not sure Alec Burks really rose to that occasion.
Yeah, and just to kind of clear things up, at least from my semi-informed perspective, I don't think that the Alec Burks decision was a long-term one. I think that was stopgap because of the injury to Bojan Bogdanovic, and that was just like a band-aid on a situation that needed to be resolved. So if Ivy is on the bench, that doesn't mean it's going to be for Burks. As far as how it worked yesterday, Burks was a non-factor. He probably wasn't really ready. He's a veteran. I don't think he's as ramped up and ready to go for preseason game one compared to year two players. But from the Jaden Ivey perspective, I mean, it was good to see how he responded and what the team asked him to do with the ball in his hands when he was on the floor. I think I'd still prefer to see it in the starting lineup, but I see the method to the madness, I guess.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Jack, the triumphant return, we lost you there for a little bit. When we lost you, I was in the process of I know that you had said you had a couple of things you wanted to get us going on today. So we started talking about the first preseason game. But yeah, take it away, my man.
So I wanted to just have a bit more of a discussion just around everyone's thoughts, I guess, on Jaden Ivey's move to the bench, and not so much for the preseason. I must admit, when the starting lineups were announced Sunday, I felt a bit stupid because I'd been saying there's no way Jaden Ivey's coming off the bench. So I'll take the L there, even though it's a preseason thing. But I guess from a long-term perspective, or just the first half of the season, I'll turn it to you, Sean. What do you think this means for Jaden Ivey? Do you think this is Monty Williams sort of setting an early tone and preaching defense, or what do you think's the real thinking behind the move and what we could potentially see play out across the first couple of months of the season?
Well, I think there's a few ways to look at it, and one of the ways might be hinted at tonight with Jalen Duren out, because there's the component of who's starting the game. There's also the component of who's finishing the game. And part of me thinks that one of the things that could happen is that the ending lineup could be Cade and Ivy on the floor and Stewart moving to center, unless Jalen Duren, who's also a second-year player with his own defensive issues, much like Ivy, really steps it up on defense. If they think they can't trust him to close games as a defensive center, I think you'll see Isaiah Stewart on the floor in that role a lot more, which then pushes everybody down and opens up that spot for Ivy, along with Thompson, along with Bogdanovic. So I'm not so concerned about Ivy's minutes, Ivy's role. I don't necessarily think he deserved a demotion, so to speak, but I also don't think it's a season-long issue. If he shows he can shoot the ball on the perimeter at a semi-reliable level to the point that it fits with Thompson and not needing him to be a shooter, then I think he could very easily find his way back into the starting lineup. I think right now the sort of litmus test was, okay, we want to improve the defense. Stuart Thompson is already the team's best defender. Take of that what you will. So if I want Thompson on the floor, what does that mean I need alongside him? I need a reliable shooter, and that's Bogdanovich. So for game 1, that's going to be Bogdanovich. Doesn't mean that's going to be the case in game 20, game 30, game 60.
So I guess, Wes, with what Sean just said there, how do you feel about that potential starting lineup of Cade, Asar, Boyan? I'm assuming Stu and Duran.
So, I mean, I don't hate it, and I think there is, I'd say, value to it, especially putting Asar Thompson in the backcourt. The way he showed he could defend Devin Booker the other night, that's incredibly valuable put next to a guy like Cade Cunningham, because you're not going to be playing a team that trots out the backcourt of Bradley Beal and Devin Booker every night, right? Usually there's just going to be one really good guard. So if you have a guy on your roster that can take Cade off that really good guard, that's really, really valuable. And it, maybe, fingers crossed, Asar Thompson can do that. Now, I should say I don't think that having Asar Thompson out there at the 3 really prevents you from doing that, as long as the other team doesn't have a fantastic wing, right? Because Cade could probably guard up and take some of the less impressive wing starters on defense anyway. But I get it with that lineup. I don't love it, but I get it. Like Sean was saying, you want defense. They're really prioritizing defense. Isaiah Stewart and Asar Thompson are probably the only players on this roster you could look at, point to, and very confidently say, yeah, they can play good defense. And Asar Thompson's a rookie, so obviously, even with all of those qualifiers that you have to put against a rookie defender, you could still probably say that about Asar, which I don't know what that says about the rest of the roster. Probably not that we don't have a lot of good defenders, but we'll take that for now. Point is, I get it. You do improve the defense. I just worry about what you're doing that at the expense of, because I did not think Isaiah Stewart looked all that natural out there when he was a facto floor spacer instead of a guy that can space the floor on the side, right? It's not his primary thing. When he's out there with that lineup, he has to be a shooter, right? And I thought he looked a little bit awkward with it. He really didn't attack on dribble drives. That made me a little bit nervous as well. Obviously, this is all feeling out. It's preseason game 1. We don't even know if that's actually the lineup that they're going to go with game 1 of the season. There's a lot up in the air, but yeah, those were my main takeaways with it. I guess to sum up, I don't hate it.
For sure. I think Sean's been someone who I would say who's had fair criticisms on Isaiah Stewart, particularly at the 4, from at least what I've seen on Twitter and that kind of thing. And everything you say is I tend to agree with, even as someone who's kind of high on Stu. But I guess, Sean, what did you see from Stu at the 4? Like, I think it was overall pretty rough. The interesting thing for me was I thought he showed a lot as sort of a 5-man. Like, the things he did well when on Sunday were him like rolling to the rim and finishing around the basket in the paint, which is stuff he's sort of struggled with in the past. He had a couple of nice blocks, I believe, which was interesting because part of me wants to see him at the backup 5, but I guess it's one game of preseason, so I'm trying to not get too fixated on it. But what did you see from Isaiah Stewart at the 4? Where are your levels of hope at? With Stu?
I mean, Stewart is a player who nobody's going to believe it until they see it for an extended period. That's fans, and that's also NBA defenses. So he was attracting absolutely no attention as a perimeter threat, which makes everything that much harder for everyone else. It also created wide open opportunities for Stewart to shoot it if his teammates trusted him to shoot it. And in the moments that he was given the ball, he did not make them. They were loud misses. I was not particularly thrilled with the outcomes of those shots. But, I mean, this thing just has to play itself out. They think he's a shooter. He obviously shows enough development in, outside of the real game action. He had periods of sustained success last season, so it's not an impossibility that this all comes together. And if he can shoot 4 to 5 threes or make 4 to 5 threes pretty regularly at a 38-39% clip, that's a dangerous weapon with his defense, with his ability to switch, with his long arms. I get it as a starting caliber player, maybe not optimal, but possible. If he can't shoot at that level, then it's just not going to work, and there's going to be some bad side effects that are negatively impacting his teammates' game.
And just a quick follow-up, Sean. So say the shooting experiment with Isaiah Stewart just doesn't pan out. Would you be fine with him long-term or across the next 2 to 3 seasons being that backup center? Because I think that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I think he would be perfectly fine as a backup center. I think that this season, as this develops, there's also the Jalen Duren question, which is how much is he developing? How much does he need to be brought along and reinforce those good habits, good defensive instincts that they want to see from him? And if they're not seeing that, he very well could be a player whose spot in the starting lineup is not set in stone. Now, I don't want to see that. I love Duren as a prospect, but I think we have to acknowledge that he's not a good quality NBA defender at this point. Doesn't mean he can't get there, but if the team is really looking for that, then maybe it's something where for at least this season, Stewart becomes a starting center and you just deal with those size limitations, and then you bring Duren as a really dangerous player off the bench.
That's an interesting thought. Duren off the bench, that would probably blow up Pistons Twitter as well. Yeah. But I think that's
I said the discourse was already bad. Duren off the bench would make it considerably worse.
Bench for back.
Sure. Well, before we get to some questions,
don't put that out there, Wes. That is pure evil. You're supposed to replace him with a better defender, not a worse defender.
Oh yeah, agreed.
I want to just quickly have a chat about Cade Cunningham. We saw him for the first time in action in, I believe, 11 months, 330-something days. Obviously, there was some rust there. I guess, Wes, what were your takeaways from Cade's 12 points and 6 assists performance?
Well, I said before the game, right, that I was really hoping to see the jump shot, right? See if the jump shot from 3 improved much at all. And honestly, early returns good. I thought his 3-ball looked pretty nice. What did he make? 3, 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4, something like that. He had a good line. He had a good line from 3. So that was the main takeaway. Like you said, he did look rusty. I thought there was a lot offensively that went wrong in the first quarter can probably be traced back to Cade not really being aggressive with the ball in his hands in those pick and roll situations. But he's going to work through that. There's nothing to be concerned about with anything that he did. He just, he was rusty. He didn't have a great game. He did have a nice stretch there in the second quarter. That was nice to see. He got aggressive. He was getting downhill. He had a couple nice finishes in transition. Seemed like he loosened up. As the preseason progresses, hopefully we'll continue to see more of that Cade Cunningham rather than the rusty one, which, I think is pretty reasonable.
For sure. And Sean, do you have any concerns with Cade once again not taking a free throw? It seems to be something, the missing element to his offensive game. I mean, the 3-point shot, obviously, but for him to become that first option, like the free throws attempts need to rise. He took 0 on Sunday. What are your thoughts there?
I've got loads of concerns about Cade Cunningham, only because my hope and expectations are so high. You want to see him take care of the ball better. You want to see him shoot efficiently. You want to see the shot cleaned up overall. You want to see him get to the free throw line. Those are all things that he'll need to do to be a superstar. He still is displaying skills that point to the potential of him being a superstar if he's able to put it all together. So it's not like I think he's maxing out at a borderline all-star player or borderline even below that. But, this is year 3. He hasn't played in a long time. Maybe it takes a bit, but the improvement needs to get there. And you weren't exactly enthused after the first game, but it's just one preseason game. There's plenty of time to knock the rust off and really show what he's able to do.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to hit one more player, and then I promise we'll dive into some questions. Killian Hayes. I think for the past 6 months, Wes and I and various guests we've had on the show, whenever we talk about Killian Hayes, it's been about him probably not being featured in the rotation. Once again, we're talking about one preseason game here, but he played really well. He had 13 points, 7 assists. Only took the 1 3-point shot, but he really stood out on Sunday against the Suns, albeit probably against not the Suns' top 5 to 6 players, but nonetheless a good performance. Wes, what can you take away from Killian Hayes' preseason debut and sort of the way Monty Williams utilized him?
This is not going to make me a lot of friends online, but I think I'm the only one that was not at all impressed with what Killian Hayes did in preseason game 1. And only because he looked like the Killian Hayes we saw last year. Like, the jump shot didn't look great. He had one nice finish around the rim. That was good, but he's flashed that before. Like, he didn't do anything that really showed, hey, I've really improved at X, where I'm now a feasible offensive player. Everything else just looked like the standard, the standard Killian Hayes that I've come to know over the past 3 years. So, and like you said, he wasn't, doing it against their starters. He was doing it against their bench, against the end of their bench. I have not changed my tune on what I'm expecting out of Killian Hayes this year, and there was nothing that he did in that game that showed that I should change my mind. So that was my takeaway. I was just, that was Killian Hayes.
That's fair. No, I appreciate the honesty. And the thing with Killian last season, I believe in the Pistons' first preseason game, he had something like 20 points. I remember it vividly because then he came out to start the regular season and his first 10 games were a massive struggle. So I don't know, Sean, just quickly your thoughts on Killian Hayes and that first preseason game, and I guess overall.
Well, as a noted Killian defender, I'll say that I was more impressed than Wes was in that game. He had a shot that displayed a shooter's touch, which is very rare for him. I think it's just a situation where he's always going to look better the less reliant on his offense the team will be, because it allows his passing and defense to shine. So if he's sharing the floor with another point guard, another shooter, if they're getting offense from somewhere, then he can just kind of be, maybe he's destined to be a Bruce Brown type, where he's not really point guard. You can't really rely on his shot, but he does all of these Swiss Army knife things that can help a team, and it's just relying on putting better players around him. Maybe he finds that situation in Detroit. Maybe it doesn't work out and he has to move on somewhere else, but it's the same thing with Killian every year. Defense is really strong. Passing and vision really strong. He seems to be getting slightly more assertive every single year. He doesn't have a reliable offensive shot, and he can't really finish in traffic. So that creates problems for his long-term viability.
All fair comments. Well, I think we'll get to some questions now. We've got one here from Patrick Wickett to open things up. Who is on the Pistons roster after the trade deadline? Burks, Bojan Bogdanovic, or Marvin Bagley? Sean?
I'd really love to know how this James Harden situation plays out before I think about who could be on the Pistons roster, just because they have so many pieces that fit into potential trades there. And it has nothing to do with who's performing or who's not or who they're trying to make space for. It's just sometimes you got to send out some players. So if they're involved in a Harden trade, 2 of those players could be involved in it very easily. If not, and they're just kind of nibbling around the edges, who can they move? I think it's probably going to be Bogdanovic. As off the team, most likely. Burks, second most likely. Bagley just kind of rounds out that list.
It's interesting you bring up Philly there and the James Harden situation, because ain't nothing better than being the big cheese. I love that name. Suggests Pistons have to bite the bullet until they can make a trade for the power forward at the power forward position. My hope is Dorian Finney-Smith, Tobias Harris, Patrick Williams, or even Tari Eason. Tobias Harris' name stood out to me there because obviously there is a James Harden trading looming. Do you think the Pistons, like bringing in Tobias Harris, I think he's on like a $40 million a year expiring contract. Is that a player you'd be interested in seeing on this roster?
Well, I don't think it's expiring. So from a skills standpoint, I think Tobias Harris makes sense. Let me jump into the details here while Wes says something very smart, and I will have further thoughts on Tobias Harris.
Those are high expectations. I hope I can live up to them. I have kind of changed a little bit my opinion on making a move like a Tobias Harris move for this team. In the short term, like this year, yeah, it'd be great. Tobias Harris, he fills a hole. He's a good shooter. He's a very good offensive player. Like he does a lot of things at the four that would unlock quite a bit, honestly, for the team. But long term, he has no more future here than Bojan Bogdanovic does. He's getting up there in age. He's not going to be, Al Horford or anything that's this good all the way into his late 30s, or at least he probably won't be because he doesn't have as much on the defensive end to give. So, I would be interested in targeting a guy like Patrick Williams or maybe Jonathan Kuminga or someone in the mold of a young player that has already proven they're good, but maybe has a little bit more room to go before they hit a ceiling. And honestly, I would be all for aggressively pursuing them, like waiting until the offseason, potentially moving the first round pick that the team has, assuming it's mid to late lottery, like making an aggressive move in that way rather than taking another swing on a draft pick. So that would be where more of my interest at the four is. Like I'd rather find something long term than a short term fix because I've talked about it, but I think they have the short-term fix. I think you can start Bojan Bogdanovic out there next to Sarah Thompson, and everything is more or less okay. So that's where I'm at with it.
I did confirm his contract is expiring, which just makes me think about my own mortality because I feel like he just signed that deal and everybody thought it was terrible, and now it's already done. So, wow. So if it's like two teams kind of shuffling the deck chairs, trying to find better fits. And we're thinking like, okay, Bogdanovic, great 3-point shooter, iffy defender, only $2 million guaranteed. Tobias Harris, not as reliable a shooter, but better all-around player. Like if Philly and Detroit said, I'd rather have your thing than my thing, vice versa, and there's not too much elsewise trading hands, then I think that totally makes sense for Detroit because Tobias Harris is not an all-world defender, but he's a power forward and he can functionally and effectively play power forward for an entire season. Does that mean you have to extend him to a new contract at a lower number? I hope not guaranteed, but even if it was, he's old, but he's only 31. He's not 34 like Bogdanovic, so he still has a few years of reliable basketball that's possible. What I fear is that those more appealing players like Patrick Williams or Jonathan Kuminga, they'll just be so expensive to acquire. And maybe I wish the Pistons weren't so embrace the idea of a stopgap competent veteran defender that just fits a role perfectly and allows your developing players to play to their strengths. I'd love just like a run-of-the-mill, competent two-way-ish power forward that can defend power forwards and won't get run off the floor. And that's all they need.
Yeah, and just to that point, Sean, that's part of me thinks like this team has their core four players, right? And whether or not they're on the team in 3 seasons or not is up for debate, or 2 seasons, whatever. But I think sometimes fans can get a little bit fixated on trying to find that perfect four-man, that sort of fringe all-star, when in reality, it probably, in all likelihood, is more likely to be like a Torrey Craig type, like that veteran, maybe on the mid-level or less, who can come in, hit threes at an okay clip and sort of give you some stuff defensively. So Yeah. I wanted to just quickly, we're going to get to this later, but the starting lineups have come out for tonight's game. And one of our questions from
We got
one of our questions here is, what's the starting lineup tonight? And so Cade Cunningham is out tonight with the left quad tendonitis, which sort of sucks. So the starting lineup is Killian Hayes, Alec Burks, Asar Thompson, Marvin Bagley, and Isaiah Stewart at the 5. So what are your thoughts on that? Yes, it's a preseason, but just to repeat, Killian Hayes at the point guard position, Alec Burks, Asar Thompson, Marvin Bagley, and Isaiah Stewart. Sean, what's Monty Williams thinking here?
That you need to put 5 players on the court to play a game. So I think that beggars can't be choosers at this point.
So, sorry, just to add in quickly, Bojan Bogdanovic is still out and Monte Morris is still out as well.
Yeah, so we're missing starting caliber-esque Bogdanovic, starting caliber-esque Monty Morris. At least he started last year and played very well. Starter in Cade, starter in Duran, and potential 6th man in who else is hurt?
I think you listed them all.
I think that was it.
Well, that's a lot of players missing. That would probably supersede many of the names that are being listed. So it's not like, I mean, Monty Williams isn't crazy. He's just kind of in a bind here. I think it's sad because I don't know how much this is going to help Killian build off of what I thought was a pretty strong game in game 1, because he's not going to have the help offensively he needs around him. But a Killian, Thompson, Stewart starting lineup is probably going to be offensively challenged.
So the first thing that comes to me, and I'm going to turn it to you here, Wes, is Jaden Ivey is clearly on the bench for. He's either done something we're unaware of, or it's as simple as the fact that he needs to improve his defense. Because the fact Killian Hayes is ahead of him, and yes, it's preseason, but I think this says a lot of what's going on. What are your thoughts? Why do you think it's as simple as Jaden Ivey's defense needs to improve, and this is something that Monty Williams has set him a task for the preseason? Because with Cade out, I would have assumed Jaden would get the start.
Well, I'll first say that Killian Hayes isn't ahead of him he might be ahead of him at the point guard spot, but I don't think anyone in the Pistons organization looks at Jaden Ivey as a point guard. He really didn't even do a ton of it last year. If we remember, he did play a ton of minutes next to another guard. So I think more so he might be behind Alec Burks at the moment in terms of the pecking order. So the reason why, I don't know. Maybe there has to be something going on in practices that we, obviously could never see. I was going to bring this up earlier, and now maybe it makes me seem smarter or more prescient than I originally thought. But I wanted to get your guys' opinion on the only thing that really bothered me from that first game was when we got into the fourth quarter and you look at who's out on the floor, and you've got Xavier Simpson, you've got another two-way guy. I think at one point they had the camp invite out there that I can never pronounce the last name of, the last name guy, Ibn Bowman or something like that.
Imude.
Marvin Bagley, he was out there too. Marvin Bagley, and then Jaden Ivey. And I went, that's a problem. That says to me that something else is wrong, because Jaden Ivey was out there with a bunch of guys, at least 2 that are only on camp invites, and then 2 other guys that are, we're thinking borderline rotation. So that really made me nervous that something was going on behind the scenes. And now tonight maybe puts a little more fuel on that fire. What are you guys thinking? Am I insane for thinking that was wild?
I'll throw some water on the conspiracy worries or just
Please.
gloom talk, I suppose. It could be as simple as they've talked to Jaden Ivey in the offseason about the likelihood he was going to come off the bench to start the year. They're trying to reinforce that as a primary role for him. They want him to get used to that going into the season. So they want him coming off the bench in the preseason. It couldn't be about people in front of him. It could be about, we need Jaden Ivey to learn how to excel in this role. That means we cannot change that role in the preseason. He has to come off the bench because he will be coming off the bench to start the year. And then as far as who he's playing with, maybe they want to help scrubs, sorry for using such a pejorative word, but like the people at the end of the roster who are getting those minutes, put them out there with somebody who can maybe help create some easy looks for them. And that's Jaden Ivey with the ball in his hands. So like, I don't necessarily think this is saying anything negative about Jaden Ivey, but it does underline the fact that he is viewed as a person that's going to come off the bench to start the year, and they have to kind of get him those reps, get him that vantage point, get him used to doing his warm-ups, then the game starting, and he's sitting and having to stay engaged. That's something you have to learn how to do effectively. It's something he's never had to do in his life. So, you get 4 preseason games. We're probably just going to see that for 4 preseason games.
For sure. And I'm hesitant to engage in this conversation for the bigger picture here with Jaden Ivey because it is still preseason. But I guess I'm going to bring it up anyway. He was taken with the 5th overall pick in the 2022 draft to play alongside Cade Cunningham. And Cade Cunningham's out tonight, so that's cool. I don't understand bringing him off the bench. I understand it in the sense of like he can give you instant offense, he can thrive he can get buckets, he can get to the paint against opposing benches and really excel in that role. And I guess it's the overarching picture is the Pistons need to win more games. I do understand it there, but from like a roster building standpoint, like you have a lot of, I guess, investment in terms of draft capital and him being a starting 2 guard. Where's the balance here? Like, if he's coming off the bench his whole second season or for the first 30 games, I don't know. Maybe I'm looking into this too much, but does that bother you at all that there's such an investment from the draft in Jaden Ivey and now all of a sudden he's a 6th man in his second season, in a season where players typically, they can struggle, but they can also take another leap. Do you think it hinders his development at all? Or am I looking into this way too much?
I mean, I don't think if he took a leap, he wouldn't be rewarded for that leap, because what does a leap look like from Jaden Ivey compared to what he did in year 1? It's a more reliable perimeter shot and it's better defense. If he does that, he slots so much more easily into that starting role. So like, okay, let's see it. This is just year 2. It's just game 1. It's just preseason. Like, I don't think how things begin to start the season says anything about long-term plans or long-term potential or long-term investment in the players. And in thinking about the team wanting to improve defense and drafting Ausar Thompson with that same number 5 pick 1 draft later and wanting his defense on the floor, it could be as easy as, we want to play Ausar Thompson. We want him playing in a role he was comfortable with. And that was, he's always been a shooting guard, or at least he was an overtime elite. So even if he has the frame and the build that could lead him to play small forward and power forward down the road, like, why does a player playing his second game of professional basketball ever need to immediately become a power forward when they were a shooting guard and overtime elite last year? Like, I think from my perspective, like, it's all going to be okay. As long as those players keep developing and show that they were the right picks, it will work itself out.
I love the balanced approach. Wes?
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with everything Sean just said. I think that is the right way to look at it, especially the rewarding of taking a step, right? If Ivey does take that step, I don't think where he starts in the year, whether that be off the bench or in the starting 5, I don't think that would prevent him from advancing, to Sean's point. And then I would say more generally, there's this thing called a sunk cost, right? Where, yeah, you put a lot of investment into something, but that's all in the past. And if it's not working, then you can move on, right? It's best not to linger with it. So you're kind of seeing this play out a little bit with Killian Hayes, and you saw it a little bit early last year too, before we had all the injury issues where he's getting less and less minutes, even though he was a lottery pick. I saw it with Sekou Doumbouya back in the day, right? It's not working out. They cut bait. Like there is a lot of value in taking things from a today approach rather than a looking back approach. So I'm not saying that that's where things are with Jaden Ivey. I don't believe that's where things are with him. I think he's still going to be a really, really good player. Nothing's really making me worried about that. I'm much more on Sean's side here long term. I'm just saying, like, if it ever does come to it, it doesn't matter if he's a top 5 pick. You got to move on. So, yeah, I like the happy approach though.
Yeah, I think I need to chill out a little bit. I'm just a bit confused.
I would
This
say
is
so.
all a bit shocking to me. I'm taking more L's. So anyway, we do have some more questions here. So we'll get through these before we do a quick preview on tonight's game. We'll share some final thoughts. So DJ Griffin says, what's the deal with the Pistons leaving the 14th roster spot open all summer or not using their mid-level to try and upgrade the roster? Has Gores mandated they do not spend any extra money? He's got no money left after the Monty signing. Sean?
I can take that one. I believe they did not have access to their mid-level exception because they were under the salary cap. They used their salary cap space to trade for players. So, like, they couldn't trade for those players using salary cap room, find themselves over the cap, and then use the mid-level exception in the same year. That's just not how it works. As far as leaving the 14th roster spot open, there's basically 2 scenarios where that makes the most sense. One, they have a mismatch roster, as we've talked about, with surplus pieces and probably Bagley, probably Wiseman, maybe have a hole at power forward they'd love to fill, veterans on expiring deals that might be attractive. Like there's pieces that are able to be moved if a deal came along. And oftentimes part of that appeal could be taking back 3 players and only sending out 2. So keeping that roster spot open helps the potential to facilitate a deal. Maybe they were just hoping to see if a deal materialized. If it doesn't, they could fill it by signing a 2-way player that they like to a guaranteed deal, or if another player on another roster in the NBA gets cut because they're just a roster casualty, there's no room for him, that creates an opportunity for the Pistons to sign a nice developmental free agent.
Yeah. I'll just add on. This was actually something I was kind of advocating for a couple weeks ago. I actually like the idea of coming into the season with that last roster spot open. Really, the only material downside to it is you don't have access to that third 2-way. But as the season progresses, right, you can take on players in a trade. And if you're really going to be, as long as the injury bug doesn't come, doesn't start knocking a bunch of people out where you need that 15th spot, you approach the trade deadline with the spot open, you could do a 1 for 2. You can take more guys back that are dishing out, which when teams are trying to cut some cap becomes really helpful, especially looking at the Pistons cap sheet. They are kind of top heavy. There isn't a ton of, like 13 to 18, that space where it's nice to lump a couple of them together and take big money back, if that makes sense. So they are going to have to do a lot of packaging, more than likely, if they're going to make a direct trade, not a 3-teamer. So I just think that flexibility that you have by having that 15th spot open might be pretty valuable in a couple of months. And as long as they don't get hurt a bunch, I think that would be the way I would like to do it. And can I real quick just say for the chat, Cade Cunningham, yeah, he's hurt. This is the first basketball NBA game that he has played in 11 months. He's going to be sore. I don't care that he didn't play a ton. So I would not worry about it, everyone. It's going to be okay. Cade's all right. I promise. I promise.
Just on that, Wes, I'm going to push back a little bit just to be devil's advocate here. I'm not worried particularly too much. This is just tendonitis, soreness, I believe, in the quad. Someone might have mentioned, or James reported out. James Edwards III. But I'm not sure. Cade's injuries in the past, I haven't been alarmed. And he's had his rookie season, he had COVID, which everyone had, but he's had the ankle injury, the shin injury, and he seems to get little niggles here and there. I'm just going to push back a little bit, and I can see why fans are a little bit concerned, even if it's more so coming from the fact they're annoyed that he's simply just not playing tonight. But I'm going to push back a little bit on the injury stuff with Cade because he does seem to get niggles here and there, and I think if it is just soreness, but I can see where fans are coming from there.
All right, Sean,
All
you
right.
got to pick a side here. Is Cade Cunningham's sore quad an issue moving forward?
I would say I'm more worried about
Loaded
Cade
question.
Cunningham's. I'm more worried about his turnovers than I am about his sore quad. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm one out here then. Anyway, let's move on. So, Chuck Brewer, can Cade, Ivey, Asar, Boyan, and Duran defend well enough? That is probably the most talented lineup we can put out there right now. Sean?
Well, I think that the real answer to that question comes through the top and bottom of that lineup, in that it's all about how Cade can guard point of attack, and it's all about how Duran can protect the paint. If that can happen, then every other piece fits nicely. And even if there is a defensive deficiency that you would see from an Ivey or a Bogdanovich, you deal with it, and the team could defend well enough. If Thompson is your only plus defender of 5 guys on the floor, it's not going to work. That's not a good enough defense. And you're going to have major problems there. So I'm hoping that in year 3, once he rests that sore quad and he's perfectly healthy, that Cade Cunningham really takes a step forward as a defender. And my hope is that Duran's lack of defensive prowess up to this point really has more to him being a 19-year-old rookie in the NBA, learning the game and maybe kind of internalizing a lot of what he has been coached, and not thinking fast enough or not reacting fast enough or just being afraid to foul. Those are all things common with young players. And then they figure things out. The game slows down. They learn how to be quality big men defenders because he's obviously got the size, the strength, and the quickness to be a good NBA defender if he can just kind of lock in mentally and do like the technique things that are required of good NBA defense.
Wes, any thoughts on that lineup? I know you've been big on it all summer.
Yeah, I'm big on it because I think the well enough there, I think that's the key, right? Would that lineup defend well? No, they wouldn't defend well. They were not a good defensive team last year. I don't really expect them to be a good defensive team this year. Part of the reason that I've pushed for that kind of lineup though is because I don't think there's an alternative where they are a lot better on defense this year. I think even if you stick Stewart out there instead of Bojan or instead of Ivey, like however you want to swing that, with Asar Thompson, a rookie, and Isaiah Stewart kind of being stretched out there at the 4. I don't think that that's enough to make you a plus defensive team either, and you're certainly sacrificing a lot of offense to do so. So I had kind of just come to the opinion that I would rather try to outscore teams than necessarily stop them from scoring. Mostly just I don't think that there's really an option on this team to do that effectively. Can that lineup defend well enough for that, win a few games in shootouts? Yeah, I think so. But anything more than that, like I'm not going to lie and say that they'd be anywhere close to average. I don't think that's a great defensive group. Not even close.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think you're more going for offense with that lineup, and then you're relying on a lot on Asar there defensively. All right, we've got a few more here that I wanted to get through just before we finish things up here. So, ain't nothing better than being the big cheese. Love that username. We brought this up last week on the show, so I'm going to turn this one to you first, Sean. Can you talk a bit about your thoughts pertaining Monty's views on analytics. Surprised, concerned, intrigued. Did you catch his comments on that, Sean, firstly? And if so, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I saw what he said, and I'm not sure that's necessarily indicative of his actual understanding of advanced analytics at the NBA level. I think maybe he was just kind of using language to prove a point, slightly being over dramatic or absurd. But I think you look at how the Suns played. I have no qualms with their style of play going against analytics. I'm not super plugged into this Phoenix Suns fan base, but fan bases just inherently get driven crazy by their coaches, and there were things that I've heard that drove Suns fans crazy, but it was not like he was going against this sacrosanct analytics playbook. It's not like he was posting up 70 times a game or doing something crazy. So I think he builds good offenses. He understands what it takes to be a good offense, and I think he understands the value of what the numbers are showing. But I think also you have to acknowledge that it's his job to learn what the analytics are saying and internalize it, but not lead by it, not talk about it endlessly. You can't just pound that into players' heads. It has to be sort of a different level of engagement with players that are reacting in real time, flying all over the court, getting beat up by other guys that weigh 250 pounds. Like, that's just not how they need to learn the game, and that's just not how he teaches the game, and that's fine with me.
Yeah, for sure. And Wes, did you have anything to add?
No, I mean, we talked about it last week. I'll just quickly, the numbers don't tell everything. They do miss a lot, and where he's at, kind of in the middle ground, I think that's the exact spot to be in.
Yeah, for sure. Well, speaking of the offense, William brings up, is the 0.5 offense set in stone, or will there be tweaks? I might just swing it back to you, Wes.
We'll see. We'll see. I didn't think the ball was snapping around there out on the court Sunday afternoon. So
There was one
I'm
play.
sure that's
there was
not
one
Monty
play.
Williams. There was one. There was one. There was one. And it looked great, and I loved it. It was preseason game one, so like they've been just now implementing this system. It's going to take some time for guys to really get used to it. All of those qualifiers, absolutely. But you look around the roster, and there aren't a ton of guys that have played like that historically, filling up the 14 guys that they have under contract. So there's going to be some push and pull between Monty Williams wanting that ball to swing really fast and James Wiseman really wanted to post up for 10 seconds out there at the block. There's going to be give and take. So it'll be interesting to see how long it takes for this to get in there and then be internalized.
Feel free to jump in, Sean.
I would just say that 0.5 offense is not an actual offense. It's just sort of like a clarion call. It's like your North Star. Just, you want to be a team that moves the ball. You want to be a team that makes quick decisions. That takes time. That doesn't necessarily play to every single person's strength. So it's not like once we see one James Wiseman post up, it's that Monty Williams has abandoned his offensive philosophy. It's that, what the hell else is James Wiseman going to do on the floor? Any answer is probably not good. So, he's going to do what he's going to do. And, sometimes you want Cade probing. Sometimes you want Jaden Ivey probing, but they will move the ball more. I think they will move the ball more intentionally. They passed a lot last year, but it was usually sort of playing hot potato around the perimeter instead of passing with intention. Even in game one, part of the thing that I like to see was sort of the passes with intention to cutters and to people inside. So I think you're already seeing sort of some of that Monty Williams philosophy rub off in the style of play.
And
Sure,
I think this
quickly,
comment is spot on. I think this is exactly it. It's not just about getting the ball out of your hands fast. It's about doing something fast. And I would add, this applies off the ball too, to your point, Sean. there were more cutters. They were utilizing off-ball movement more frequently in that first game. So that's all good positive signs and stuff that you want to see. But yeah, just Football Academy Australia is knocking it out of the park there with that one. That's spot on.
Aussies no ball.
That's right. You always listen to an Aussie. That's what I've learned.
Wes, you kind of answered the question I was going to ask you. The last one we have here from Patrick Wickett once again. So thanks for the comments. Is Ivey still coming off the bench in January? Meaning, does he play himself back into the starting role?
I would say yes, because I think my positive belief in Ivey, watching him all of last season, is that if the question is his shot reliable and can he improve on defense, I sincerely think his shot is going to be reliable. I think he's putting in the work. I think it looks so much cleaner. We saw some evidence of it in the first preseason game. So once he proves he can be a three-point shooter, it's a lot easier to slot him in that starting lineup. So I'll say that he's back in the starting lineup by January.
I'll ask a follow-up question to you, Jack. So you've got to answer this, and then I'll give my answer. What is their record by January?
Oh, wow. The Pistons, obviously the Pistons. Is there roughly 40 games played by January? I'm going to say if it's around 40, I think they are.
And I should say we're assuming Ivey's not starting.
Yeah, I think they're 15 wins and 25 losses, something like that. Maybe 14 and 26, something like that.
Okay. So that's not a bad spot to be in. That's probably loosely in the play-in hunt. And because they're successful up to that point in the season, I doubt they change up the starting lineup. If you were to tell me that, the ship's going to sink and things are going to be, we're going to be on the struggle bus again by that time. Yeah, I mean, I think Ivey would still have to earn it, right? I don't think they would just give him the starting lineup spot. He'd have to earn it, so he'd still have to take the step. But I think that if you're having a fairly successful season and, successful by this team's standards, you're probably not going to change it up in January if things are going well. So things are going well? No, I doubt it. I'm going to be real popular today.
At the end of January last year, just for a point of reference, they were 13 and 39.
At the end of January.
At the end of January.
Yeah.
Let's avoid that.
Let's not talk about last season. I wanted to close it out here. So the Pistons play Oklahoma City in roughly 10 to 15 minutes. Now that we know the starting lineup, who's in, who's out, what's one thing you're each looking for in tonight's game? Sean?
I'm looking forward to watching the Thunder because that's where all the good players are. From a Pistons perspective, I think I want to see how Killian embraces this role in the starting lineup, just to see if he has the aggression that I want to see from him. And then I want to keep seeing Jaden Ivey do the things he did in the first game, maybe at a higher level. That's really all there is to take away from this game. It's preseason. The roster's missing 6 rotation players. It's kind of a loss. So take what you can get. Everybody gets reps, lots of minutes for players that probably aren't going to make the team. Give them some run, let them score. That's what I'm rooting for. And then, of course, just to be continually blown away by Osor Thompson and his defense. That's what I want to watch every night of this season.
Wes?
Sean, you're going to hate me. Marvin Bagley, man. Is he going to do it again? Like, that's the only thing I'm actually interested to watch tonight. Does he string 2 games together? He can't, what did he play? Like 12? He only played the fourth quarter or something. He put up what he did. Like, does he go crazy again? Does he really establish himself in the rotation and start to push for, like, this isn't even a competition anymore, right? Like,
I mean,
I
don't hate it because
I want to see it.
If it's not a competition anymore, that means there's no James Wiseman on the floor. I can live with Marvin Bagley as a backup center. That's perfectly fine.
was going to say, but that means you're guaranteed Marvin Bagley minutes, and I know
I
you're
mean,
not a fan of that either.
I don't hate Marvin Bagley as a backup center who shoots like 75% near the rim, as long as he's not shooting 3-pointers that he's definitely going to miss. Like, just use his skills in the role that he's can excel in. That's what I want to see. And for limited minutes, where his lack of defense doesn't really matter, that's fine. I'll take it all year.
Love it.
Oh,
I hope.
with
I
that,
hope he does it.
we might end on that note with Sean Court, the managing editor of Detroit Bad Boys, complimenting Marvin Bagley
Bro,
III.
Marvin Bagley.
So, yeah, I think that will do it, guys. Thanks for a great show. Thanks to Sean for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on. I'm sure everyone tuning in knows where they can find you, but tell the people the best place they can find you and anything you got coming up.
Just follow the Detroit Bad Boys account. The season's getting started, so you're going to see a lot more action on that account. Read the site, read all the contributors, follow along with us, and we'll see how this season takes shape.
Of course, love it. And thanks as always to my co-host, Wes Davenport. And thanks to everyone in the comments, the chat. Tonight was pretty active. We've got a Pistons game tonight. Where although there's a few injuries, we've got it's a really exciting season coming up. So thanks again to everyone for joining us. And until next week, go Pistons.